Hello everyone, we are thrilled to welcome you on this roundtable dedicated to regenerative economy, which is powered by Intent, which is a platform which is matching stakeholders and companies. And to start with, you know, at ChangeNOW, we're always starting by an inspiring introductory talk. And we are looking for people who have the Shoot the Moon projects, but this time we have even better. We have a Shoot Mars project, because the first speaker that we are going to welcome is Lauren Fletcher, and he has been working at the NASA on the Mars project. So, Fletcher, how are you with us? So you're not in Mars, but on California. So, good morning for you.
Yep.
Are you hearing us?
Thank you for the kind introduction. It is a great pleasure to be with you here today. And many thanks to the many of you watching for what I believe will be an interesting set of panels, which will yield many deep insights into the rapidly evolving regenerative economy. You may not have realized it, but the world has changed. We now live in a world where we can plant trees with drones. Next slide. I am the inventor and visionary behind tree planting drones. I first envisioned the idea in 2009 at COP15 in Copenhagen. A combination of my time as a NASA engineer and scientist, studying climate change at Stanford, and a deep understanding of emerging technologies. Not to mention a little bit of science fiction, although my mom would argue a lot of science fiction. While I was at the UN conference, it became clear to me that the global scale of deforestation was not just a major contributor to climate change, but that it was causing massive impacts to biodiversity, degradation of all types of environments, impacting food security, social well-being, income generation, and peace building at all levels of society. The size of the problem is huge. We are currently losing 15 billion trees a year and have about 2 billion hectares of degraded lands needing restoration for another 2 trillion trees. That's a lot of trillions. In order to overcome the annual deficit and restore the other 2 trillion trees, we need to be planting tens of billions of trees every year. I built the first tree planting drone and founded BioCarbon Engineering, now recently branded as Dendra Systems. Dendra and the others that followed me into the market are employing swarms of drones to plant 1 million trees a day for each team in the field. Because if we don't design for this scale, we will never overcome the annual deficit, let alone restore the other 2 trillion trees. From zero, a global industry has risen following my dream for global scale ecosystem restoration. A bold vision that inspired Sir David Attenborough to present it on our planet. Honestly, having Sir Attenborough narrate your dream is the stuff of legends. I am both humbled and grateful that the world listened. It's not often that we get a chance to move the needle. And yet, we need more of that. The world needs leaders like all of you if we are going to continue to move the needle. Now, this is an amazing accomplishment, but we have to do more, and we have to do it differently. The global market for tree planting, next slide, is projected to grow from $14 billion a year today to $800 billion a year by 2050. Companies are lining up to reap the financial benefits of hundreds of billions of dollars in annual tree planting revenue for their own shareholders, while leaving the 2 billion people living in forest communities around the world entirely out of the solution and excluded from the direct financial benefits. In the USA, as an example, there are 11 million private forested landowners. This middle section shows that 60% of these don't own enough land to justify the deployment of swarms of drones. At the global level, it's 80%. 80% of private landholders cannot access this technology. The technology as it is today and the companies in the market are an important part of the solution, and they are especially good for enterprise scale projects. This means governments and very large landholders. So how can we move the needle for the other 80%? My original vision is still correct. We must put this technology into the hands of people doing the restoration. Next slide. I'm proud to announce that we have accomplished exactly that at Beta Earth by partnering with the amazing We Robotics, a Swiss NGO dedicated to the democratization of drone technology. Together, we are addressing the actual problem I wanted to solve. How might we equip and empower local communities to become environmental stewards? The Flying Forest Project was created as a decentralized model with more equitable revenue sharing throughout the value chain. Next slide. We designed and built a simplified low-cost system that distributes seed balls at a high speed approach of up to 600 per minute. One drone, 600 per minute. A team with 3 drones and 3 pilots can plant 50,000 a day, exactly the scale that is needed for small-scale landowners. Additionally, we built the very first of its kind system to plant mangroves, and we tested it in Panama just last month. Now, the seed balls are made locally with seeds collected locally. The drones are flown by local pilots. Long-term monitoring and maintenance will be hired members of the local community. This solution provides jobs for people, doesn't compete with other traditional nursery methods of tree planting, and brings new skills and education to the local community. The power of local means that the end-to-end system, including the cost of equipment and labor in this decentralized model, is 10% the cost of the other drone companies, and still provides financial incentives to drive social local uplift. And that is how you create a solution that empowers the other 80%. Next slide. With this approach, we will be able to equip local communities with tree planting drones and are working to scale up to plant 1 billion trees a year across a network of more than 30 countries. And we already have completed paid projects. Next slide. This decentralized model is very powerful. At Beta Earth, we are using this not just for the Flying Forest project, but for many other problems that are in need of good solutions. Next slide. It is a core principle that products and services must be created to align societal, economic, and political well-being with a thriving ecosystem. And when it comes to the regenerative economy, this is even more important. Next slide. But the key limitation to the innovation ecosystem has been that solutions are created prior to really defining the problem and identifying the true root cause. This causes a misalignment in that your solution may never really address the problem you want solved. Next slide. In order to overcome these inefficiencies in the innovation system, we created the Venture Studio focused on people and planet. By putting people at the center of our designs, we can ensure that we address local challenges to solve global problems. We follow a systematic process, starting with defining the problem and identifying the true root causes, and then establishing requirements for any solution. This ensures that the solution will meet the needs of the local communities. Next slide. Finally, complex problems require complex solutions. Trees, for instance, are cut down and destroyed for a number of reasons. Because planting trees is not the same as growing trees, just planting new ones may not address the root cause. Now, the investment world likes simple solutions that address a narrow part of the problem. The rest of us know that the world of problems is complex. We work to identify multi-stakeholder solutions that address the problems we really want solved. Now, this requires a network of partners and communities with access to both technology and funding. Now, we do not have much time. We only have 5 years to reverse the worst impacts to climate change. We must use innovation. We must use technology. We must embrace every financial instrument that speeds up ecosystem restoration. However, when we do it, we have to embrace the power of local and ensure that the people most impacted are at the center of project design. This is not only important for moral or ethical reasons, but also financially. We know that those projects that include local people as main stakeholders and as your long-term environmental stewards are also the most successful projects. For example, in order to see carbon credits return on a forestry project, one needs to ensure that the forest will be standing for 20 years. How could you possibly guarantee that without listening to the community, without co-designing the project with them, without providing new jobs and other co-benefits? At Beta Earth, we are creating ventures with hearts. We use innovation, data, and our expertise to turbocharge nature-based solutions. While we have some amazing partnerships for which we are so very grateful, we recognize that we must grow and work together if we want to create a global movement. And we are always looking for new partners, entrepreneurs, and investors. Last slide. We have the most pressing challenges of the century in front of us. And we need to include the people in the solution if we really want to move the needle. Join us so that we can build it the right way, for the right reasons, from the very beginning. Thank you.
Well, I think throughout this kind of crazy project he presented us, he really set the framework and set the ambitions, and we have seen that thinking regeneratively is really quite high. It's a high level of ambition. It's quite complex. And just before introducing my next speakers, I would like to present you the work that we've done at Imagin, which is a consulting firm I founded 10 years ago, and to give you just 4 key insights to understand what is regenerative economy. So the first thing you have to understand if you want to think regenerative is to have to switch from a technological, if you're a company, a technological and client-minded approach, business approach, to a systemic and ecosystemic approach, which means everything has to be aligned between the business, the society, and the environment, which means as a company, you have to be aware that each decision you take, each action you make, you have to integrate what are the consequences on society and environment, and what are the negative impact and the positive contribution that you can generate throughout your decisions and actions. That's first key point. Second key point is the 2 dimension of regeneration is re/generation. So you have the regeneration instead of repair, rehabilitate, restore. So it's all the damages, and it was a great example with Lauren that it gave us. So how we can regenerate, for example, nature, biodiversity, and so on. And there is also the generate, which means for what you do from now, how you can boost all the holistic contributions that you have throughout your business, throughout your actions, okay? Third key components is the fundamental guidelines that we have worked, especially with Eric and Interface. We will see that during his interview, is 2 things you have to do at the same time. It's neutralize, and I'd say neutralize, not minimize or mitigate, it's neutralize all your impact, your negative impact in all you do and all around your value chains and regarding all your stakeholders. I know this is hard, but that's the way. If you want to be regenerative, you have to start with that. And the other thing on the other side is how you can maximize, how you can boost all the contribution, the positive contribution that you can have, whether economical, societal, or environmental. And the questions that you need to ask you more, we'll also see that also with Kalina, is the people I'm working on, where I'm working in terms of territory, suppliers with which I'm working with, where and with which I'm going to have the most positive impact. And it's there where you try to become regenerative, okay? And the last thing is we are perfectly conscious that being a regenerative company is, as I said, a very, very high ambition. So let's be pragmatic to do it and start with a project. And we will see around also the examples that most of the most advanced companies or institutes working on regenerations have started with projects approach. So this idea is really, let's be pragmatic. And once we have worked on a project, you can scalabilize it to the whole company. So for that, I'm going to have the pleasure to discuss with and to present 2 great speakers to change with. So we're going to start with you, Kalina. So Kalina is an engineer, a PhD in neurosciences, and she's also the founder of the Ceebios. So if you know Janine Benyus, is the Biomimicry Institute in the US, well, Kalina is the European equivalent of Janine, and Ceebios, French also, of course, and the Ceebios is the equivalent of the Biomimicry Institute in the US. So Kalina, I really would like you to tell us throughout what I've explained on those main characteristics of the generative company and generative approach and vision, your own journey that you did throughout biomimicry, since that's your key subject of reflections and actions, on how you moved and how you widen your research and your approach from a biomimicry approach centered mainly on products to a bio-inspiration centered on process and system.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thomas. And I'm kind of intimidated by the fact that you compare me to Janine Vigneus, who was one of my mentors. And there are plenty of people that have been practicing biomimicry and bioinspiration in Europe way before I was way before I was born myself. So, with a lot of humility, I'm trying indeed to push that idea of biomimicry through innovation, and especially sustainable innovation. And so to actually really understand the full potential of biomimicry, we have to go back to the core question, which is, what is the ambition? And actually, if we know, and I think we all recognize now that the direction we took is the wrong one, and so what should we do then in which direction should we go, and what is the reference actually that we're looking for? We need a reference. And the idea behind biomimicry is that life and biological organisms could be a remarkable reference for our development. And why? Why? Because living organisms have experienced 4 billion years of evolution. And this trial and error process, which selects the most, let's say, performant solutions in terms of energy, matter, or information management related to environmental constraints, this very long process of evolution has led finally to remarkable systems from, let's say, individual cells to complex ecosystems, either marine ecosystems or terrestrial ecosystems, which are very efficient in doing exactly what we are trying to do desperately in our Homo sapiens societies. And when we are talking about reducing the impacts or having a regenerative process, we are actually exactly asking the same question that evolution has asked, nature actually, and living organisms. So if you look at any individual systems in terms of energy flows, in terms of matter flows, or in terms of information flows, any living system entity is optimized regarding these three different flows. For example, living systems are running on mostly solar energies or renewable energies, and that's why an increasing number of either companies, researchers, or public policies are now regarding artificial photosynthesis. So how do we mimic actually the way plants are harvesting solar energy to be transformed and stored in other typologies of fuels? There is a huge interest in trying to produce energy with very low or even no carbon emission through artificial photosynthesis. In terms of material sciences, biological materials are absolutely amazing in their diversity of properties, of functions, of adaptations, of manufacturing. They are self-organized, they are self-healing, so remarkable properties. But at the same time, they're produced with very abundant materials, which are locally available. And in the end, the molecules that are produced by living systems are entirely recyclable. So you have a circular economy in living systems. And all these materials are themselves supported by what we call soft chemistry, which means that the chemistry in living systems, which is in huge contrast with the way we are doing chemistry, is done at room temperature and pressure. There is no huge heat. For glass, for example. And so it's with, let's say, a very low impact on the environment and on the environment. And in terms of information management, if you compare the consumption, if you look, for example, at the competition between a chess player, a real chess player, and a computer, and you look at the energy consumed by either a human brain or a computer, you have at least 10 to 100-fold difference between the energy used by a biological computer compared to a man-made computer. So in terms of information management, in our society, which is just exploding in terms of digital experience, like the one that we have today. In terms of information management, living systems are absolutely remarkable because they are doing amazing things, analyzing hundreds of information at the same time. A human neuron is capable to address thousands of signals coming within a few minutes with a very low amount of energy. So for all these different reasons, which are actually answering key pillars of ecological transition, environmental transition, biological organisms are seen like concrete models. And this field of biomimicry, on which we are completely devoted here in France through Ceebios, has been actually experiencing a huge increase over the last 2 to 3 decades. So biomimicry has been practiced by humanity for a very long time in terms of hunting techniques or building techniques or self-medication, for example. But this increase was really recent, so 20, 30 years, because it's quite logical. To practice biomimicry, you need first to understand how biological organisms work, how do they function, and it's only very recent that we have the technologies and the capacity through molecular analysis, through microscopy, or through, let's say, satellite observation to be able to actually observe and explain how biological organisms work. And so now we have the capacity to say, oh, wow, this works remarkably. So how do we do to transfer it in another field?
So since we're ready for this biomimicry or bioinspiration revolutions, can you maybe give us a piece of examples?
So we've been working, we have a lot of remarkable examples. I gave the example of artificial photosynthesis. You have companies like Eel Energy, who is working on harvesting energy for marine currents using waving membranes instead of rotative membranes, which has very limited impact on local biodiversity compared to traditional and conventional ways of trying to harvest marine energy. There is a remarkable startup emerging from the work of a French chemist, sorry, it's very French, I will give other examples later on, working on actually the capacity of some plants to harvest heavy metals that are actually depolluting the soils. And not only these plants are depolluting the soils by actually sequestrating these heavy metals, but they integrate these heavy metals in their own chemistry, bringing to a very efficient physiology in the plant. And so what this researcher, which is called Claude Grison, did, and she created a company out of it, is called BioInspire. They've extracted actually these molecules from these plants, which are concentrating these heavy metals coming from human activity, to actually create a new field of biocatalysts. Maybe it's a little complicated for our public. Let's say new molecules to actually do soft chemistry. So you are doing both remarkable things at the same time. You depollute the soil, you regenerate the soils, and on the same time you are bringing a new perspective to chemistry. If we go at more systemic levels, which is hard, very hard, because biology is complicated, biology is sophisticated, it's aggregating a lot of functions at the same time. And so we are very humble as humans. We are not very good at multifunctionality. And so very often when we practice biomimicry, we're looking at one function at a time. But in several fields, and especially in agriculture, for the last, I think, 20 to 30 years, there have been a lot of initiatives such as permaculture, which are actually taking biological ecosystems as models to practice a new way of growing, actually growing food. And there is this remarkable farm in France, which is called the Bec et Loin, who really applied the biomimicry, so the imitation of the interaction that you see in natural systems, to actually bring again biodiversity in the soil at every layer, actually, of the growing system. And they've scored, actually, after 3 or 4 years, the number of insects and the number of birds coming back into their yard, and I don't remember exactly the percentage of improvement, but it was a very huge percentage of improvement. And I think they've mentioned that several species have not been observed in that region for the last decade, and they came back specifically on their farm. So this is, for me, a very beautiful example of regenerative economy on such a huge issue as food, of course. In the field of water management, you have companies like Suez or Veolia who have worked on imitating the way that natural ecosystems are able to purify water. And so they understood, okay, what are doing the plants, what are doing terrestrial plants, aquatic plants, what are doing the different actually components of that ecosystem to actually purify water. And what they did is that they plugged artificial, they recreated actually natural ecosystems downstream of their plants, purifying plants, to completely absorb the remaining pollution. And this has, of course, plenty of positive benefits. It's regenerative for biodiversity, because I think most of people that are listening to us know that there is a huge need and emergency to recreate humid zones, which are absolutely crucial for biodiversity, and a lot of them have been destroyed by our development. And so these companies are recreating actually humid zones, which is regenerative for biodiversity, and they are depolluting water, and it's really nicer for people living around than conventional plants. The last example may be related to the building sector, which is, again, a major sector of impact, and the fact of tomorrow having regenerative design applied to city, and how do we think and how do we design our cities so that they actually reflect the specification of ecosystemic services, and how do we think by design our infrastructure so that they are welcoming for biodiversity, that they harvest energy, that they purify water, that they purify air, like any ecosystem does. How do we actually push that idea into the design of our cities? And there is an American initiative which is called the Living Building Challenge, which has been developed by the Living Building Institute. And they are doing an amazing job by actually changing the specifications and the list of criteria, very ambitious criteria in terms of environmental certification. And I really recommend you to see, to browse their website and to see the very beautiful projects that have been certified all around the world. With this collaboration absolutely necessary between different disciplines, and especially the actually introduction of biologists in their design process, so that to integrate actually regenerative strategies within their different projects. So there are plenty of them, and I really recommend the audience to see that. And there is, let's say, for any companies which has production sites, we could apply these different actually elements I've just listed, and I think this is a transition to what interface is doing.
Thank you very much. So, and found in what you said that is very encouraging that we can deal, in fact, with complexity, and complexity if we want to really achieve this very high level ambition of regeneration. I think this was very, very interesting, and thank you, Kalina, because you have shown throughout your examples how we can deal with complexity and make complexity things not complicated. And that's what we're going to see with our second speakers. So thank you very much, Kalina. Eric Rampelberg. So you are General Manager of Interface for South Europe, India, and Southeast Asia. And you have worked for former industrial companies like ABB and Saint-Gobain before joining Interface. So for those who doesn't know Interface, they're #1 in the world for carpet ties, which is, you know, maybe one of the most polluting things we can do, but not at Interface. And that's what Eric is going to tell you, because really, Interface for us, we are working for this regenerative process on more than 3 years, and we have really admiring what Interface is. It's really also mentoring examples, and I think that's really maybe the first company which is the most advanced in this reflection on what means regeneration for a company. So Eric, that's what I'm going to, that's going to be your challenge in 10 minutes. Yeah. It's to show us throughout 2 big projects that started more than 25 years ago, thanks to a visionary founder of Interface, which was Ray Anderson, which is unfortunately not yet anymore with us, but we really inspired 25 years ago this vision of this zero impact, and then how to become regenerative. So
in a very humble way, because I'm going to be the concrete example maybe of what we just heard from Kalina, Lauren, and you. Yes, we are a manufacturer, so we have an industrial activity. So we are designing, manufacturing, and commercializing carpet tile for commercial application, like here, I should say. The company has been created back 1973 by Ray Anderson, the founder. He was our CEO, and to be fairly clear, we were polluting the environment for years and years and years. And what happened in 1994, Ray Anderson stood up and said, there is something wrong. We have this kind of activity with a negative impact on the environment, and we are part of the problem. So this is one point Kalina mentioned about the fact that you have to claim that you know what happened. And Ray Anderson said, we are part of the problem, and we will become part of the solution. And from 1994, 1994 to 1996, he established a project and defined a moonshot, what we call a moonshot, Mission Zero, to be restorative by 2020. That does mean that the goal and the mission was to have no harm, no negative impact on environment. And at that time, we have absolutely no clue about the way to do that. So we asked for some advice. One of them was Janine Benius as a senior advisor. She's still a senior advisor at the board. And Ray Anderson embarked everyone around this project and say, guys, we go over there. We don't know exactly why, but we will work and tackle our impacts. Not just identifying, reducing, or, as you said, mitigating. We are drastically addressing them. So it was a long journey. So 94, 96, 2 years to make this our company pivoting completely on its business model, establishing metrics clearly from 96 with some targets to 2020, and all along the way trying to experiment, learning by doing, because at that time we are a US-based company, so you can imagine sustainable development in the 90s in the US, not an easy task. But so learning by doing, the economy, the circular economy was not called like that at that time. So we progressed, and last year, I should say, we declared the completion of Mission Zero, because we reduced the greenhouse gas emission by 96%. All the factories are using 100% renewable energy, and we have reduced our carbon footprint, global carbon footprint, by 74%. So clear objectives, a moonshot, metrics, a framework. But during this journey, we lost Ray Anderson in 2011. But then something happened with climate change. So from 2016, we were preparing about the fact that it's not enough. Restorative is okay, no impact is okay, zero footprint is okay, but it's no longer the topic. The topic should be regenerative, should have a positive impact. So we worked from 2016 to 2020 in order to prepare the next mission, the next moonshot, which is climate take back for us, to be regenerative by 2040. Once again, we don't know exactly how we will do that, but we have a project. Yeah, we have everybody around this project. Ray Anderson is no longer there for sure, but it's in the DNA of the company. So we know that we have to tackle radically, drastically the decarbonization of our activity. So we continue to live zero, I should say, the mission zero. We know perfectly that we have to deal with and embrace the new carbon system. So we love carbon because we want to sequester carbon in our materials and do everything possible not to release carbon in the atmosphere. That's what we need. And once again, this mission is clearly science-based. So the paradigm is for the business model to be based on that. And science-based, we know that we have to restore natural carbon sinks. So what we've done with eco-design and biomimicry for the products back to the 90s, we are using it again for our factories.
Can you tell us a bit more on this?
We are challenging our team around the concept about factory as a forest, and which is a bit crazy, but we ask our engineers, say, guys, the factory is based there, and there is a forest nearby, and this is an ecosystem. This is the perfect ecosystem. There is only positive impact in this ecosystem. So we want you to be challenged on water, on soil, on carbon sequestration and absorption to make sure that the plant will be benchmarked against this ecosystem. And changing the mindset, changing the way of building factories, the way you use energy and things like that. So it's once again, it's a big exercise for us to nurture our DNA, to make sure that we'll do the right things to have a positive impact. So we don't know exactly yet, once again, how we will do it, how we will achieve this mission up to 2040.
You have already a first achievement that you could give us? Before
it's in the pipe. I mean, for the CapEx, we know now that the CapEx is an investment, a greenfield, to build a new plant. We know that we have new metrics to assess versus an ecosystem, so we don't invest unless we are able to prove that we have absolute no negative impact, for sure, but now positive impact. And this is clearly what we are creating as a ripple effect, because we embark the suppliers, we embark our customers, we now embarking our stakeholders and customers around that to make them aware about this environmental impact, social impact, and in order to make sure that we try with our, I should say, at our small scale as a company, to make sure that we are able to embrace everyone. So it's a kind of thing that just for us as the interface, we would like to share that it's possible. And if you are crazy enough, you can even do more crazy things. So,
thanks very, Eric. It was fantastic how you, from where you started and to see 25 years later where you are and where you want to go. It's clearly a very, very encouraging, second, very, very encouraging messages that you're addressing. So many, many thanks. But from what you said, you were talking about ecosystem of partners.
Yes.
And that's exactly what we're going to see in our second roundtable. So thanks to both of you with the NGO side. So let's welcome our three new speakers. Thank you very much and welcome. So we have two speakers here. Welcome Jean, welcome Sylvie, and we have Véronique, who should be also online with us. Is Véronique here? Yes. Good evening, Véronique. Many thanks.
Hello.
So I'm going to present you very quickly, and then we'll enter in this second roundtable, which will dedicate it, as I said, you have understood, and really Eric and Kalina demonstrated it, that you have to think as an ecosystem approach, an ecosystem of partner. And in this second roundtable, we really would like to emphasize on the role of NGOs in this regenerative journey. Okay, so for that we have the pleasure to welcome Véronique Andrieux. She is the general manager of WWF France, and she has a long professional experience of NGOs since she started as Oxfam, and after before becoming the general manager of Action contre la faim. And now for a couple of months, that's it, Véronique, the general manager of WWF France. And we will also have Sylvie Goyet with us, which is a senior advisor at the Fondation Prince Albert II de Monaco, which has also worked in the Pacific, especially in New Caledonia, but you're going to tell us about what you did, especially on coral in New Caledonia. And we have Jean Jalbert, welcome Jean, which is general manager of another foundation which is called La Tour du Valat, which is in south of France. Lucky man, working at Marseille, that's it, Jean, nearby, and working especially on humid zone and the protection and regeneration of humid zone, but you're going to tell us things about that. So the first questions I wanted to address you, the three of you, is, as I said, can you just give us your vision of what NGO, the role of NGOs in this regenerative journey, and how you concretely work on that, especially with a nature-based solution. Maybe, Sylvie, you want to start?
Sure. Thanks a lot, and happy to be here. It's a bit difficult for me. The Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation is a private foundation. We give out grants and money. It's not exactly an NGO, an activist, and mobilizing partners. But let me answer your question. That said, yes, we've been embarking, the foundation has embarked on nature-based solutions already very early on, focusing on biodiversity and focusing on climate impacts as well. We are either supporting projects, and we do run calls for projects. This year, in particular, we have a focus on nature-based solution for coastal resilience. So we have a particular focus on that issue because, and it's very timely you have this session, because it is becoming, its potential is becoming evident as we go. It was recognized before, now the potential is even more. So we're doing that through projects, we're doing that through partnerships, and we have large partnerships, and I'll be happy to talk to you thereafter about the large partnership we've built on coral reef, yes, for example. We also do a lot of advocacy and influencing. We're fortunate to have a head of state as president of the foundation, and he spares no effort to really advocate and communicate on the messages, and the messages are clear. They're using nature-based solutions as a key tool to address both climate impacts and biodiversity loss. Okay, maybe can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing, what you did on coral, and with which companies, which actors, also political and territorial actors that you emphasized on? Two examples, if I may. I'm watching the time. I was based in the South Pacific, as you mentioned, for a few years. There, the main ecosystems that communities and countries rely upon are the coral reefs. Coral reefs provide food, provide cultural amenities, social amenities, but also it's a barrier to climate change and climate impacts. Coral reefs, as basically break the waves, break the energy of hurricanes, and are an essential tool to mitigating climate impacts. So in the Pacific, we have developed a number of projects to safeguard the coral reefs, as a climate tool, if you wish, as a climate resilience and climate adaptation tool, so regenerating coral reef ecosystems, but also thereafter providing co-benefits in terms of social, in terms of economic, in terms of blue economy as well. You know, the tourism industry rely on the coral reefs for diving, for tourism. So a lot of work is now happening in the South Pacific. The second example I'd like to give is the work we've embarked at the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. We are spearheading an initiative with the Paul G. Allen Foundation, together with government donors and private and banks and BNP and others, to an initiative that's called the Global Fund for Coral Reef. We know that conserving is one thing and it's useful, but we need to demonstrate the economic benefits as well, the blue economy benefits. This initiative is gathering up to $500 million through two windows, a grant and an investment window. We're trying to package projects that will both safeguard resilient reefs and at the same time build a blue economy for the communities, making sure that they have the sustainable means and the social means to face both the climate impacts and the biodiversity loss. So those are two examples.
That's great examples who show the
highlight.
interactions and also the holistic dynamics that you're putting in place to create this regenerative approach. So
exactly, and I think that's a key word, your holistic approach. Yeah. We're really trying now to have integrated approach across climate change and biodiversity, the two big pillars and the two big challenges of our times.
Thanks very much, Sylvie. Maybe we're going to go to Véronique. Maybe, Véronique, I would like to ask you, since you have a great experience throughout NGOs and both on social and environmental side, and when we talk about regeneration, we also can talk about social regeneration. What can you tell us from these different big NGOs you have been involved in, and especially from the WWF, which is, of course, as we all know, a very large international and powerful NGO. How do you deal with this regenerative approach?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your invitation. I'm very, very glad to participate in this very important topic. In terms of regenerative and also the solutions that nature can bring to climate, well, I would like to give, first of all, the approach that WWF has on the topic. So we know that we have already reached 1 degree according to science, and that we're on track really to reach 1.5 degrees, which is the critical threshold, sometime between 2030 and 2050, so well before the end of the century. So this is really makes up for the climate crisis. And so science, of course, says that the most crucial action that we must take is to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. But that also natural nature-based solutions can play up to 1/3 of the mitigation efforts that are needed. And so that's why in the, let's say, run-up to the COPs later this year and to the IUCN World Congress, there is a lot of, let's say, energy around and a lot of interest around the nature-based solutions. So at WWF, we're very keen on seeing nature-based solutions that are effective and quality nature-based solutions, because this energy, it's good, we need to seize it, and it's very important because they are, let's say, they're very important conservation and restoration interventions that are then there to deliver measurable and positive climate mitigation and adaptation benefits. But as you said, there is also co-benefits when it comes to biodiversity and when it comes to social outcomes. And so if we take, for instance, social outcomes, we have seen projects, for instance, in Madagascar or in other biodiversity hotspots that are bringing tangible improvements in terms of, for instance, livelihoods, because For instance, there is in Madagascar, there is a project of mangrove restoration. And we have seen an improvement of crab fisheries and the yield of crabs in those areas, thanks to the restoration of degraded mangrove areas. And so this makes that the income, it's the #1 source of income for those coastal communities. And the income has increased up to plus 10% of income, but also there is a social benefit in terms of disaster risk management, because as you know, mangroves really protect from floods and cyclones effects on the coastal communities. So that's for the social part, but then there is also the biodiversity part, because of course mangroves serve as a nursery for a number of endemic fishery species. So this let's say, triple nexus is something that we try to focus on very much, because it could be easy to find, let's say, nature-based solutions that are mainly targeting quantitative climate objectives, but let's say leaving aside and in some cases even having negative effects on the biodiversity or the social components and effects.
Thanks very much, Véronique. So maybe, Jean, I'm going to rebound on what Véronique and Sylvie just said, because both of them really pull this red line, I would say, of holistic dynamics, I would say, related to regeneration throughout what you do. I know you're doing also kind of the same things on the shore and on the vineyard. Maybe can you give us those examples to what you do also with this holistic vision and the dynamics that you put it on the ground, I would say, to be positive and regenerative.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, first of all, I would like to say that what has been just presented by Kalina and Eric is absolutely fascinating. We see that this bio-inspiration, biomimicry, regenerative economy is absolutely great. But we have also to be aware that in the real world, the majority of the business sector and the public sector is still considering nature as an obstacle, as a constraint to development, or as a free resources in which we can tap for whatever.
Utilitarist vision.
Yeah. And here comes the beauty of the nature-based solutions, because first, it reverses the perspective. Nature is not anymore an obstacle, it's a solution. And the solution is, as it has been already explained, has two benefits, two co-benefits. So first, addressing a societal challenge like climate change, like water supply, like food security or health. And at the same time, it addresses biodiversity loss. So that's what we try to implement. So we, at Tour du Valat, we are a research center for wetland conservation. So our topic is wetlands. And for years, you know, we know that nature is under pressure, but wetlands is even worse. It's the ecosystem on Earth which has been the most degraded and destroyed over the last century, while it has been proven that it is the ecosystem on Earth which is the most useful for human beings, the most, which contributes the most to human development and subsistence. So it's stupid, but that's it. And we lacked argument to help business sector, public sector to step in and to restore, to use, and to safeguard these ecosystems. And here, the climate change offers us a nice opportunity. So climate change is going to affect very much wetlands, but also it is the opportunity to prove, to demonstrate that wetlands are going to be a bit of our life insurance for the future. They are very effective and inexpensive climate buffers. And that's what we are testing. Kalina spoke about the capacity of wetlands to depollute water, to be the kidneys of nature, but also they are kind of big sponges. And we know that climate change is going to affect very much our countries by especially very long and heavy droughts, followed by heavy rainfalls with floods, with all the consequences we know and we see on the TV every month. And here, the wetlands can really buffer these effects, can absorb the water in excess during heavy rainfall, avoiding floods, recharge groundwater, and release this water during the droughts, or through the groundwater table, or through the river, maintaining the flow. That's what we are testing by restoring wetlands all along the water streams, the catchments, and especially on the seashore, because another impact of climate change is sea level rising. And especially we are located in the Rhone Delta in the Camargue, which is a nice area, but it's a very flat area. 70% of the area is below 1 meter elevation. So it means that it is really threatened by sea level rise. And already there is strong erosion in some part of the Camargue, and we are testing at the moment for the last 10 years the restoration of former salt works into natural lagoons, so letting the sea driving the system. The front dike has been broken. There is a second dike 4 or 5 kilometers inland, and in between these two dikes now the sea is driving the system, and we're just trying to help it for first restoring biodiversity, restoring natural ecosystem, lagoons, which prove to be extremely rich, and also supporting economic activities like fishing, but also reconstituting a kind of sandbar, dunes, which are going to be the next defense against storms. And so here, at the moment, it's very difficult to make local people understand that letting the sea entering into the Camargue is not a threat, but it is just in the opposite, an opportunity, yes, and a buffer against climate change. So this is a kind of a project we're implementing at the moment.
Okay, very interesting. And as you said, these wetlands are one of the best, our best life insurance for the future. Yeah. So many thanks. In the few minutes that we have to before concluding this roundtable, I would maybe like to finish with a kind of a political questions. I will ask you to the three of us is many companies are really seeing you as kind of with a philanthropian vision approach in the relationship they set with you. While what we see and what we are convinced of is that this expertise this ground expertise that you are developing, this capacity to know and to interact with local people and local from the territories on which we are doing all those actions, all those programs, are becoming more and more key in this regenerative approach and in this capacity to overcome and face the challenges, both climatic and biodiversity challenges that we have in front of you. And as Lauren was saying at the beginning, we have 10, 15 years max to radically change this situation. So I would like to ask you, do you see any changes in this recognition that you have in all those expertise I've just presented? And if not, what could we change to make this happen? So maybe Véronique, start with you, because as also WWF, you have maybe you're the biggest NGOs of the three here. And you worked for a long time with big companies. How would you react to that?
Well, maybe a number of comments. First of all, it's true that the climate crisis is just so huge, and it's there, it's upon us. So it's a whole of society effort, and that's why we also engage with companies, because we believe that companies are part of the problem, but they're also part of the solution. So the idea is to create some knock-on effects, so that there are like early movers, early adopters, or some champions that are positioning themselves as leaders in combating the ecological crisis and the climate crisis. However, there are, of course, massive risks of greenwashing, and there are massive risks of, for instance, working on the, let's say, more visible aspects of nature-based solutions, but on the other hand, not making the necessary, indispensable effort in terms of reducing emissions of greenhouse gas emissions. And that's really, really important, because the key #1 priority is to exit fossil fuels. It's to really transform the industrial sectors, the food system. I mean, these are like systemic changes that need to happen. And of course, nature-based solutions, as I said before, can be and need to be part of the solution. And as Jean was saying, it's great that now nature is seen as part of the solution at last, and that's really great. So it needs to be done in a very, let's say, ensuring the environmental integrity aspect of it. That means that it needs to be driven by science, and it needs for nature-based solutions to be effective, it needs to be additional to the greenhouse gas emissions reductions. It needs to be there needs to be metrics and a baseline to be sure that we can measure the attribution and the results. It's also very important that these nature-based solutions are also implemented in an inclusive manner. This means including local communities and local stakeholders to ensure that they raise the challenges that those nature-based solutions can pose. We're talking about, in some cases, very large-scale and land-intensive solutions, which, when it comes to forests, for instance, or grasslands or wetlands, it's really large-scale areas. And as we know, there are increasingly pressures on land tenure. And so it's very important that we also combine nature-based solutions with measures to decrease the pressure on land, and also with inclusive approaches with indigenous peoples and local communities on the ground. So, but that's in terms of quality and effectiveness, what we said.
Okay, thanks very much, Frank. Sorry, but I'm the bad timekeeper, so we have to conclude. Maybe in 1 minute, Sylvie, can you just give us your own...
Yes, I'll be very quick,
approach?
just
Yes.
a couple of points.
No,
I know
okay.
you're stressed, but I'll second what was just said by my colleague from WWF. 2 quick points for me. One is there are initiatives along those lines. The Global Fund for Coral Reef is one, where we're bringing in the private sector to invest in nature-based solutions. That's possible. Those initiatives are still very few, but that exists, and we're trying to reach out. There are also good examples of insurance products. For example, insurance products for coral reef in Mexico. There's a good example by Swiss Re of that. The second point I'd like to mention, I'll go back, I'll refer to what was mentioned by the previous panel. 2 big, in terms of challenges, as you ask, is 1 in terms of metrics and 2 in terms of benchmark. Metrics is something we need to work on for nature-based solution, and benchmarks as well. And that was rightly pointed out by my colleague in the previous panel. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Sylvie, Jean, you have the last word?
Yes, very quick. Yes, things are moving for sure, but not at the pace it should be moving to address the climatic and biodiversity challenges. Far from that. And I have the feeling that, yes, this point of metric is key, especially for the biodiversity. Biodiversity is really complex. It's all about interaction, how to measure interactions. I don't know. And we don't know at the moment. We have not the clue to engage people with a key and clear and common metrics to measure our progress against this goal. Another issue is that as long as nature is, and the natural capital is not inside the accounting of the companies, we will not take care about it. I mean, the business sector will not take care unless, engaged, committed organizations like we just heard. So we need to really ensure that nature and the natural capital is taken really into the accounting, national accounting and accounting of the companies. As long as we will not able to do so, I fear that we will be unable to meet our goal.
Thank you very much, Jean, for this last words. So many thanks to all those inspirational speakers. I hope we will have give you energy and clues to embark on this regenerative journey. And let's keep on going with ChangeNOW Summit. Goodbye. Thank you.